So I wanted to record on video some of the things I went over during the workshop for you to refer to if you need to. So here I have a LyX window open with a couple of documents here that I will refer to later. And then I just opened a new document called New File 2. So what is LyX? It's what you see is what you get word processor, but it's not quite what you see is what you get, in the sense that you can see, you don't have to program anything, you can see all the formula you type and so on, but the document that will be produced doesn't look at all in terms of layout like what you see on your screen. In fact, the spirit is that you should concentrate on content when you're in LyX and forget about all the problems of layout, or most of the problems of layout. Of course, everything can be parameterized if necessary, margins and all sorts of things, but normally all of this is automatically set by choosing a document class. So when you start a new document, first thing you do is pick the basic settings for the document. So you go in Document and Settings, and here you're already under the hood. Here I could pick a bunch of more fancy parameters, but the first thing you pick is the document class. So you see you have article, different types of article. You see that you have, for instance, for the American Mathematical Society article, which is what I will pick because I'm used to this, but you can pick a number of different things for articles. You can pick different styles for books, or letters, or presentations, reports, and so on. Now, when you write for a periodical, for a professional periodical, very often on their website, they have a document class that you can put in the appropriate folder for LyX to find, and then you can just pick this particular layout, and automatically everything is going to be set up for the style of the journal. Okay, so let me pick this. Now to illustrate what I said about the fact that what you see in LyX is not the same as what the documents looks like, and that picking the class picks pretty much all the layout parameters, let me show you on a already prepared article. Okay, so this is an article I submitted recently. So in LyX it looks like this. Okay, now if I go in the settings, you see that the class is the AMS article, and if we press this button to see the actual document, which will be in this case, as things are set up now, a PDF. So when I press this, it generates a PDF, which takes a second, maybe a little more. So this is what it looks like, and you see that, let me go from the beginning here. You see that in particular you have addresses for the author, the date, the abstract, keywords, mass subject classification. All this is not at the top like it is in the document because it is part of the class that date, mass classification and keywords go as footnotes on the first page. And I have this type of layout for the document. Okay, now what if I picked a different class? So let me go back to LyX here, going to Setting, and pick, for instance, IEEE transaction. Okay, so it didn't find the layout for something, because of course, when we talk about the environments, you'll see that there are environments that are specific to certain classes. But it doesn't matter. Let's see what we get now. Okay, so you see that it looks pretty different, right? You see that the style for the title, the place where the addresses are put, the style for the abstract, and the overall layout in 2 columns instead of 1 are all very different. So you see that changing the class takes care of the layout because you want a specific layout, and you don't even think about what the layout is going to be. You focus on content when you are in LyX. Okay, so this is the first thing I wanted to talk about is effect on the document class and the fact that you don't worry about the layout. If you need to worry about the layout, of course, in the settings you can do some more fine-tuning in local layout, pick some fonts, type of indentation, the kind of columns, page layout, of course, margins. There are default margins, but you can mess with it, default language, and so on. A number of things that you can parameterize. Now let's go back to our empty document for which I have picked the class AMS article. So now the general spirit is that most things fit in a certain environment, and then the layout is going to depend on what kind of environment it's in. Depending on the type of article, the kinds of environment available are different. So here I am in American Mathematical Society environment. So here you have this drop down button that gives you the available environment. So in particular, you see that you have environments for the structure of the document: part, section, subsection, subsection, special section. If I was in a document class like AMS book, I would also have part, chapter, section, subsection, and so on. You see that you have counterparts with star next to it, and as you can read above it, it corresponds to unnumbered sectioning. So in particular, when I use, say, part 1 on structure, in this part, let's say I have a part 2 on formulas. You see it tells me that it's not quite spelled properly. So you have, of course, just like in any modern word processor, a dictionary that corrects on the fly. So in part 1 I'm going to have sections. So section 1, which is going to be an example of section, and a section 2, which is going to be on cross-referencing. And for now, let's leave it at this. One thing that, so that's the beginning of a structure, and let's put a section or two in this as well. Okay, so let's see on mass mode, and another section on figures, and let's put before that a section on index and table of content. Of course, this is not quite where it should be in terms of on structure or on formulas, but this is just to give an example of how you build the structure. And then I might want to have a title for my document. So let's do something like that with, I don't know, the author. And we're going to leave it at that for now. Now, before I start with part 1, I may want, say, forward or something like that, and that might be something where I don't want the numbering. I want this without numbering. So let's say it's part without numbering. Introduction or something. Okay. So let me put it that way. Okay. So let me save this document as an example. Okay, so we have this structure. One thing that I want to point out here is that once you have the structure, you can click on this button here that says toggle outline, so that gives you the outline. In this outline, right now it shows only table of content, but we'll see that when we have more objects in the document, this section can show us more things. So here I can ask it to show more of the outline. And one thing that I want to point out is that even when you have things in your sections, let's say something like that, you can decide to change the structure and, for instance, to exchange these two sections 1 and 2. Then you can use this, and for instance I can exchange them, and you see that what was my second section became the first section, but all the content is carried over. And of course I can do that at any level. Yeah. So this can be very practical to handle a larger document when you want to move independent parts around. Now let me start about cross-referencing, since this is the section we have here. Okay, this is not the second section, but it doesn't matter. One of the things that you might want to do in this kind of situation, precisely where I start with this is the second section because it was, but it's no longer the second section, what I should have done is something like that. Is put a label to reference to. So this is a very important button. These labels are one of the very important aspects in LyX or in LaTeX, is that you handle cross-referencing by calling a name rather than a number, and the numbering is readjusted automatically when the document is generated. So for instance, this could be, okay, this is a section on cross-referencing, and this is the section on example of a section. Okay, and now instead of saying this is the second section, what I should have said is use cross-referencing, and this is section, and this is to refer to an existing label, and here it's going to show me all the existing labels, and of course there might be many in a large document, but here this is a section on cross-referencing, and this is section example of section. There we go. Okay, so now you might say, well, that doesn't change anything for what we see, but then if I look at the corresponding document, so I generate the document, and you see that I have, this is section 1 and this is section 2, and if I exchange my sections, then of course I have exchanged the section, they change number, but I still have section 1 and section 2 in the proper place. Now this cross-referencing can be a reference to a section, a page, a theorem, a formula, So let me, for instance, start with formulas. One of the big advantages, at least for scientists, to use a software like LyX is to be able to create formulas easily, much more easily than with equation editor in Word or something like that. So let's say I create a formula. So I'm going to use math mode. So this is a toggle in math toolbar, so I'm going to do that. And then here you see that you have set display mode. Now, one of the important things here, if you're going to start using LyX, is that you can find pretty much anything you want with a button. But very quickly, looking through the various menus of buttons is cumbersome. The important thing is it's easy to learn, because you see that when you hover over a button, it gives you the keyboard shortcut. Right? So here I can use this button, or I can use the keyboard shortcut. Okay, so now I have an equation in display. I could have an equation in line. I'll talk about this in a second. I have an equation in display, and let's say I want an integral. So here I have an integral sign, and I want the upper bound and the lower bound. And here you see that you have the, for both of them, again, the keyboard shortcut. So that's what I'm going to use now. And let's say I want to integrate arc sine. What did I do? Okay, let's say I want to integrate sine x dx. Okay, this here I use the shortcut to introduce a little space. I could have done that with mass spacing here, where you have, so sin space is what I used, and you see that again on the right you have the command for it, which is this backslash comma. Okay. Okay, so this is just for the sake of having an equation. I'm going to give it a name and therefore put a label. So it's integral of sine. Okay. Now I'm going to create a second equation in the second section. But this time I want to maybe write something a little bit more sophisticated, just to show you that you really can create any equation you want very easily. So let's say I'm going to use matrices. So here I have a matrix. Here I can choose the rows and columns. So let's say something like that, 4 rows, 3 columns. Here I can pick the alignment. This is just saying that it's centered in each one of the 3 columns. And this is the decoration. So this looks like a determinant. I can have a norm, I can have a set, parentheses or brackets, or none. I'm going to go with something like that. And then the entries, I just fill them. But of course they don't need to be just numbers. I could have formulas for each entry. So for instance, I had this command for an integral that I have learned before, and I'm going to go from some symbol, let's say some Greek letter, to cosine x, and then I can integrate. Say you see that here you have psi, so you have again shortcut, but I'm going to use that for the first time, and I'm going to use what? Sorry, some fancy multiplication with t. well, let's say that's one entry, and then I can keep going with strange entries just for the sake of showing some of these symbols. Okay. You can find pretty much anything you want. Okay, so just a second to do that. And of course, if you know any LaTeX, you can enter commands to enter LaTeX code directly. For instance, if you know that you want the sum from y equal 1 to n of 1 over I squared, you can just enter that very quickly. Here you have, again, the shortcuts that you would use to, for instance, write a fraction. So that might be, so let's say I want the square root of 3 over 2, 1, 2, 3, something like that. And then of course I want to multiply this with another matrix. Let's make it smaller. So let's make it a double integral. I don't remember how to do that. Let's take a double integral like that. So you know, this one is not the one I wanted. This one. Let's make that omega of g of x. Sorry, g of xy dx dy. Okay, equal. Whatever it equals, it might be something that where you want to use cases. So here I introduced this cases in an equation. That's one of the many environments in math mode. So it could be, I don't know, x squared plus 1 if x is positive, and then you want to add a second condition. So here I'm moving to get this, which is a button to add a row. So here I have add row, add column, delete row, delete column. Okay, so I'm adding a row, and here it's say something like that otherwise. Okay, and I'm going to again give a name to this equation. Equation complex. Okay. Okay, and I should put something like that. So now, for the cross-referencing, of course, I can say things like in view of, and then reference the first equation, we will evaluate the second equation. And again, the question is, what does it look like when you generate the document? Okay. So it looks like this, and you see that you have 1, 1 here. This is something, how the equations are numbered is something that you can pick, but by default in the AMS article mode it's numbered by section. So this is 1, 1 because it's the first equation in the first section, and this is 2, 1 because it's the first equation in the second section. And now what I wanted to point out is that, again, if I exchange these two sections and generate the document again, Then of course, this is now the first section, so the number becomes 1, 1, and the number for the second section is 2, 1, and of course now, instead of having in view of 1, 1, we will evaluate 2, 1, we have in view of 2, 1, because 1, 1 became 2, 1. Okay, as I said, these labels can refer to sections, parts, equations, anything that is part of a specific environment. For instance, it could be, say, a theorem. And a theorem typically has a proof, so we can start a proof, and then to show this we need to use, say, this equation here, and that's it. Okay. This theorem should have a label. If I want to call it later, let's call that the good theorem, and then later on I can refer to it. So I cross-reference it, theorem good. The format of the reference is something you can pick, right? I prefer to have the default, which is just a reference, but you can pick the format. It can be on page, it can be the reference on page. There are various parameters you can pick for that. Okay. And then if we look at the produced document, you see that again the numbering for the theorem has been generated automatically. And of course, if it was theorem 4, here we would have apply theorem 4 because it refers to the label, not to the number. Okay. Now you see that now that we have a few more objects in the document, in the outline I have now table of contents, equation, labels, and references. So when you have a large document and you need to look through things, you see that now I can have a list of the equations or of the labels and where they are referenced to. So if I pick, for instance, here, it's going to send me in the document to where there is this reference. Okay, so I'm going to take a break here and continue in a second video.